Hello. Welcome to another installment looking at how we go about structuring and organizing our language and literature oral commentary. We have had one installment where you had a brief introduction to me, another where we've explored the task in its generic form, and our most recent installment, which you must watch if you haven't already, is getting to grips with the criteria. So now I'd like to address how you go about formulating your global issue and choosing your text, which I think often leaves many of you feeling rather overwhelmed. My first suggestion is that rather than trying to formulate a global issue, you firstly choose your text, or perhaps you choose a single text that you know you want to work with, and then you think about what will combine with that text. Pairings that work very well, I won't give specific titles, but pairings that I've seen working very well are often literary texts that are paired with non-literary texts that are quite visual in nature, so that you have a very nice contrast going on between the language mode that it's employed in your literary texts, where you're exploring, in depth through your extract, the authorial choices, the written choices, and then you marry that up with a conversation about a text that employs a much more visual mode. And these seem to lead to quite interesting orals. That's not to say, of course, that you can't choose two very language heavy texts, or equally pair up a lit text, which is quite visual in nature, such as a graphic novel, Persepolis, for example, with another visually heavy text, such as an advertising campaign. But you must choose texts that you are personally interested in, and texts that you have felt in some way or another engage with you and relate to you. Your global issue, as we've said before, needs to sit within your 5 areas or your 5 fields of inquiry, which we've spoken about before. And it must, of course, be something that is seen to be relevant and significant on a local level, a national level, and a transnational level, and to some degree be, relevant to you as a speaker. So you need to find something that has some kind of global impact and significance. And actually, most of the things we discuss do. So having come up with something that sits either within art, creativity, and imagination, and looked at a kind of keyword in there, such as creativity, or science, technology, and the environment, culture, identity, community, beliefs, values, education, or politics, power, and justice, you then begin to formulate a global issue around the 2 texts that you have chosen that has relevance nationally, transnationally, and locally. Now, I think that perhaps it's all too easy to go to a kind of certain handful of themes, or if we like, focus areas. For example, the idea of female oppression and patriarchy is very, 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 very frequently done. Now, that does not mean that you cannot address that issue. I would simply say that if you do, perhaps let's talk about something that hasn't been, overexplored. Or if you are going to go for a very kind of standard investigation, such as the way in which patriarchy oppresses women, which is very relevant, but as I say, has been discussed a lot in the orals that I've been listening to, then perhaps we can be a little bit more specific. So, for example, the way in which patriarchy oppresses women by silencing their voice. Let's get a little bit more specific, okay? Now, as I say, I'm a firm believer in conversations of equality, but I have heard an awful lot of orals recently that explore the idea of patriarchy or injustice. Now, very relevant, very important topics, as I've said. So I'm not suggesting that you don't cover these topics. I'm simply suggesting, see if you can find a slightly new angle on that topic. For example, you know, if you're studying The Handmaid's Tale and you quite rightly want to explore the power dynamic between men and women, patriarchy, then perhaps, you know, rather than going looking, as I say, at the way in which patriarchy oppresses women in The Handmaid's Tale or patriarchal systems, perhaps we could talk about the way in which patriarchy strips women of their individual identity. So we're just getting that little bit more specific, and we're talking about the impact here of your particular area and focus of discussion, which is patriarchy. The language that you choose to shape your global issue in, firstly, we really want to structure it as a question, a how does or to what effect is kind of question. And as I say, you want it neither to be too broad nor too narrow. You want to remember that if you make it too narrow, it will be difficult perhaps to combine with your second text. So you want a little bit of wiggle room, if we like, or you want the language that you use to give you a certain amount of flexibility. And another thing to remember here, I think, is that when you introduce your oral, you can specify in your introduction that, you know, the ways in which we see this developing in text A are not the same as the ways we see it developing in text B. So there may be a difference. And remember that comparison is not just similarities, but it's also differences. But make sure, as I say, that the language you employ when you formulate your global issue gives you space to play, okay? And you can define as you move into the text. So, as I say, quite simple, really, in a nutshell. One, firstly, go to the text that you like, okay? Two, find moments in that text that excite you, engage you, spark your interest, and then think about marrying that first text with another text that you've studied. Think, I would say, about trying to match up language heavy with visual heavy text, because they make for quite an interesting conversation. And thirdly, make sure that the language that you use to structure that global issue gives you some flexibility and doesn't lock you into a conversation that perhaps is better suited to one text but does not work very well with your second text. So have fun with it, enjoy it, and use it as an opportunity to explore the aspects of the text that you have found particularly exciting. Good luck. Oh, and by the way, did you notice we have yet another strange object? And it is this very strange little, I don't know what, dinosaur, dragon, and you'll have to excuse the babyish theme. I know that we're not babies, that we're all incredibly clever adults, but I have a young child, and these are the best little bits and pieces I can find to engage your visual brains as I talk to you. So bye for now, and good luck formulating your global issue.